Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Nona from thealignlover.com. I have an exploration video for you today where I will be more or less waxing poetic about the different types of beauty within each ID in the Kibbe system. This is not going to be a very technical video or a video centered around style or silhouette accommodations. Really, I am just trying to appreciate with you the different flavors of beauty, what makes different types so enchanting and unique. As always, before we get into the examples, my quick disclaimers. So firstly, I'm basing this off of the details from Metamorphosis, so I'm using less recent examples, and my intention again is to appreciate and explore the different beauty archetypes, the casting of each ID. Secondly, I am not a certified Kibbe stylist. I don't think that exists as far as I am aware. I don't think David has a certification system. And if you really want to confirm your ID, you'll have to talk to him. Otherwise, the rest of us are enthusiasts. Thirdly, Kibbe IDs are not these measurable, quantifiable, concrete parameters. They're concepts. They're abstract patterns overall. Yes, they have a physical foundation, but the stronger or more powerful message, what makes the system so interesting, so fascinating, that, in my opinion, is more abstract relative to something much more concrete. And that is the way that fabric or a garment interacts with your physical body. And paying attention to that physical interaction is much more helpful in the dressing room rather than trying to embody this abstract idea or concept. You're not going to be asking, would this work on a romantic? You're going to be asking, in the dressing room, before you invest your money in an item, is this going to work for me? Just one more thing to note. Everyone is so unique with so many different subtleties. So do not box yourself in. Draw inspiration where it's useful. Find similarities where it's useful. And if you find that certain details or specifics are not really helping you, don't worry about it. Don't use it. Do not put yourself in a cage. All right, so let's get into the actual IDs, starting off with the romantic faces. So the most yin of the IDs, these faces really embody that conventional sense of femininity, very gentle, soft, yielding, magnetic, receptive, vulnerable, gentle, compact, softly curving, fluid, delicate. So you're going to see that in their faces and in their kind of first impressions or their essence. If you don't know them very well, you're most likely going to assume that they have these qualities just because of their face and their natural resting facial expressions. Very sweet, soft, vulnerable, far from assertive or predatory or forceful, very compact and almost doe-eyed and delicate. And they tend to really look the most beautiful when they have soft face framing, wispy layers that really extend or exaggerate that soft quality, so deeply found in their facial features. As for the romantic silhouette, soft, wide curves, not a lot of angularity and sharpness, so you can't really compare the romantic curves to the modern hourglass being quite angular. The romantic silhouette is composed of curve on curve, or kind of rounded shape on top of rounded shape. No harsh or sharp edges. It's a very gradual kind of outline. All right, so now let's add a little bit of yang, sleekness, sharpness, angularity to that romantic foundation. And a really important kind of concept or observation here is that when you juxtapose contrasting elements, they just exaggerate or emphasize each other. So the little bits of sharpness or angularity in the theatrical romantic, especially with their face, further exaggerates their softness and their lushness. So it makes them look, I would say, even more sensual than the romantic, just because of that visual tension, kind of like salt and spice, just really waking up your eyes and giving them a more striking kind of sensuality, if that makes sense. So again, we still have that foundation or that base of small curve, delicate curve, roundness, but now we have more angularity, a little bit more sharpness, a little bit more pull, tapering, the nose, the eyes, maybe a bit of the jawline, and it has that visual tension that makes it a little bit more jumpy. It jumps out at you a bit more. Now for their silhouette, kind of the same thing. We're taking that romantic foundation, introducing little bits of yang, sleekness, sharpness, angularity. So they look, I would say, even more delicate than the romantic because they're not as wide and they have a little bit more sharpness, which again makes them overall look a little bit smaller because they don't have that overall cohesive soft width. So that little bit of edge, that little bit of pull, sharpness, it further intensifies the fullness or softness on their faces and on their silhouettes. All right, on to the soft gamines. These are the most youthful, at least in my opinion, looking women of all of the IDs. They have that roundness to their features and that compactness without as much delicacy as the pure romantics. So if the pure romantics have soft, gentle curves and arches, the soft gamine has like saucer eyes, really round apple cheeks, and their features tend to be bigger. They tend to take up much more space on the face. There's less space between their features, which gives them this kind of animated, exaggerated look. But with all of that softness, again, there isn't anything super sharp about their face. So they have that very, very dynamic, animated, youthful face. They look like dolls, or I would say elves. So in terms of silhouettes, the soft gamine has small scale yang. Again, their actual bone structure is softly angular, a little bit of sharpness or squareness, especially through the shoulders, more tapering throughout the body. In terms of the more petite or yin scaled IDs, I find that they have something closer to like the conventional hourglass because they have, again, the sharper, wider, square shoulders, and then the tapering of the rib cage, the smaller waist, the tapering out of the hip bones, and then the soft flesh that reinforces that shape, more flesh on the chest, hips, and a smaller waist. So that's just one thing I note. And again, still quite delicate. All right, so on to the flamboyant gamines. The flamboyant gamines still have that small scaling, the yin scaling, more petite, more compact, but their frame is even more yang than the soft gamine. They tend to be more angular, a little broader as well, and their undercurrent tends to be more dry, more lean, more well-muscled. And in terms of face, you can see that they have more elongation or broad contours instead of shorter, rounder contours. You can see more like a diamond shape. That tends to be quite common, heart or diamond, instead of like very round faces. Overall, their features still take up a lot of room on their face, so not a lot of space between the features, which also gives them that, I would say, characteristic gamine exaggerated look where the face just has that dynamic animated element, just the proportion of facial features to facial size or space, but their overall features, again, more young angularity, more broadness, more tautness, especially in the cheeks, more angularity, especially with the eyes, and a kind of sharper lip shape. As for their silhouettes, again, they have this lovely small scale yang angularity, broadness, strength. They're very well defined. They tend to have long legs or a leggy look that is quite common, and they have this sleekness as opposed to softness that dominates their frame. All right, now on to the classic family, starting off with the soft classics. First thing to note is their features are a lot more spaced out compared to the gamines. So if the gamines have that juxtaposition of yin with yang, the classics have that moderation of yin with yang. So more of that balanced or averaged yin and yang ratio. So their faces are less animated. They're a little bit more spaced out in terms of facial features, more evenly dispersed or distributed. You can say that. More regular spacing. And their overall face shape tends to be a little bit more oval or elongated, but rounded at the edges or softly curved, as opposed to very round, very delicate, very soft and curved. Their features very moderate, balanced, but still with more of an arch than slants or angles or sharpness. So the overall vibe that this quality or this collection of features gives is very understated, sophisticated, elegant. They just have that balanced, sophisticated, but still soft face. They don't look as vulnerable as the romantic. They don't look as youthful as the soft gamine because they have that young sophistication and they look a little bit more mature, but they still have that receptive, magnetic yieldingness and that soft vulnerability. As for the soft classic silhouette, they are moderate, so they're going to look softly straight or just slightly curvaceous instead of exaggerated. They are taller and wider compared to the more yin types, and they have no sharpness really. They have very balanced edges or rounded, softened edges instead of square, sharp, angular outlines to their silhouettes. All right, on to the dramatic classic faces. So again, moderation, but with that extra dose of yang, balance with that extra dose of angularity, broadness, squareness. And something that I've noticed or observed, if you compare dramatic classic faces to flamboyant gamines, there's a big similarity. So if you imagine the dramatic classic facial features taking up more space, being larger, and if you shrink their overall facial shape or size, very similar to flamboyant gamine and on the opposite. And if you take the flamboyant gamine faces, you kind of make this space between the features bigger and the overall features smaller, and you make the face size or shape larger and a little bit more elongated, very similar to dramatic classic. Again, that's just something I've observed. Let me know if you see it too. So anyways, the balance with slight yang preference gives a very, I would say, model-esque face, very sculpted, very precise, very elegant, but also bold. They have that extra bit of assertiveness and strength and strikingness to their face. Now, in terms of the silhouettes, you are getting more broadness, more elongation, more angularity, and more of that dry or leaner, well-defined flesh type or musculature, more taut. All right, so on to the soft natural. So the soft natural is going to be moderate to slightly small in scaling or slightly in scaling, and their frame is just very softened yang, and softened yang is broad angularity, a bit of bluntness, and bluntness means like a quick change in direction. So like think of a bevel. That's a blunt kind of angle, and their undercurrent is soft. So they have that romantic, fleshy, rounded, curvy quality that gives them that soft and soft natural. So in terms of their face, you're going to see that broad angularity, especially through their cheekbones, but through their jaw. You're going to see a bit of that blunt or kind of beveled shape in their nose, but their facial features are going to be soft and more rounded as opposed to like sharply angular. So we're gonna get like square or slightly diamond face shapes with soft cheeks, soft flesh, and a more irregular dispersion of the facial features, so not as like precisely balanced as a soft classic, but not as like big, not taking up as much space as the gamine family. So overall, this creates a very direct, very fresh, earthy, natural kind of beauty with still that softness, but there's like this sense of earthly athleticism, that earthy physicality that really dominates their face. I think you can see this more obviously in their silhouette. They have that juxtaposition of that softened yang frame. So again, that beveling, that broader angularity, more of that width with that softness. So that causes their curves to be even more pronounced, even more voluptuous, because the softness, the fullness is sitting on a frame that's a little bit broader and wider. Let's get to the flamboyant natural. So the flamboyant natural has yang scaling, so they're larger or they have longer, more enlarged proportions or ratios overall. Their frame or bone structure has more of that soft and yang broad angularity, more of that bluntness, more of that elongation, and their flesh or undercurrent is yang. It's more taut, more dry, more well muscled or well defined. So in terms of faces, what you get is that very statuesque, chiseled face with common elongation, a lot of square jaws, square facial features, or oblong or rectangular facial shapes, a lot of lovely, strong jawlines. You also notice that their facial features are more on the yang side, so a little bit more straight or angled as opposed to very arching or curved. more prominent bones even in their nose and sharper lips. And the effect is very striking and athletic. A lot of models fall into this beauty pattern. All right, so the silhouettes of flamboyant naturals, again, tend to be very athletic, statuesque, chiseled, very, very elongated at times. They tend to be the tallest, I think. Tallest, and they have this lovely broadness and angularity, especially through their shoulders. Again, models tend to fall into this idea. They have a silhouette that's not delicate, I would say, and it's not narrow. That's why it's not yang. It's softened yang. It's broadened, widened yang. All right, so now we are on the other end of the spectrum from when we began into the dramatic family. So starting off with the soft dramatics, they have that yang scaling, the very statuesque, elongated, larger frame and proportions. They have that romantic undercurrents. Their flesh and their features tend towards softness, fullness, arching curves, or roundness. So with the soft dramatic faces, you'll see a lot of angular high cheekbones, strong or tapered or slightly elongated jaw lines and chins. Then you'll also see arched eyes, slightly angled, curved eyes, soft cheeks, very luscious lips. So overall, they give you that striking, stunning juxtaposition of yang with yin fullness. So the visual tension between their yang bone structure and the full round fleshiness that goes on top makes them look so luscious. The same goes for their silhouette. Their silhouette is very elongated, angular, a little more broad, but you still get more of that narrowness that comes from pure yang. So when you put flesh or softness on top, you really notice it. It's a very powerful kind of silhouette because it's bold, it's big, it's larger, it's more statuesque, and then with that comes big curves, big, bold fullness and curves. It's very, very noticeable. All right, so finally, the dramatic faces. Pure yang. Yang in scaling, yang in frame, and yang in flesh. So in terms of their faces, gorgeous, statuesque, chiseled cheekbones, more streamlined or tapered kinds of jawlines and overall facial shapes, very taut flesh, and angular or sharp facial features and placement of the features. And what you get is a very striking, almost predatorial look. They're kind of the opposite of the very receptive, romantic face that was kind of like taking it in. This dramatic expression penetrates. It's got more of that projecting quality. And I think you can so easily see it. They just have that bold, striking, confident, penetrative beauty. Now, for the silhouettes, they are narrow and angular, but not delicate because of their size. So delicate would be like very compact and small. Dramatics are narrow but large, so you can't really consider them delicate compared to romantics. Anyways, they're very powerful, sleek frames, very continuous, a lot of angularity and tautness going on, very contained, a lot like architecture, very sleek architecture. That's what I compare their silhouettes to. All right, so here are all of the faces put together. Romantics over here being on one end of the spectrum, the most delicate, compact, softly wide, arching, gentle. You add a little bit more yang, then you juxtapose yin and yang, you get the gamines. You moderate yin with yang, you get the classics. You add that soften yang concept and add softness, soft naturals, more yang undercurrent, flamboyant naturals. Then you get to the yang frame and scaling with the soft features, soft dramatic, and then pure yang dramatic. So you can kind of compare the extremes, the more penetrative, chiseled, assertive faces of the dramatics, and the more delicate, rounded, more yielding, receptive looking faces of the romantics, and you combine them in different ratios, play with those combinations, and you can kind of see the map play throughout all of the very unique and different IDs. And just remember that this system stresses overall balance or ratios of yin and yang, and you don't need to try to create a formula or measure it down to the decimal point when figuring out what resonates with you the most. So that is it for today's video. Really just a little rambling on the different kinds of patterns, the different manifestations of beauty, so many beautiful faces and silhouettes, so much diversity. One is not better than the other. Maybe you find one type or one pattern a little bit more fascinating, but they are all lovely and beautiful and attractive in their own unique and special way. And in the future videos, I'll talk about more unique manifestations of some of these concepts, like how to accommodate a very soft and compact silhouette or a larger and more taut silhouette to extend those qualities and have them reflected in your garments and in your outfits. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye.